set as ever. And what's me in the papers today then?
Well, there's one story that's shocked and horrified a lot of the international press, of course, and is making more front pages than anything. As the Independence headline puts it, Afghans vow vengeance for soldiers' killing spree. They say, of course, in that paper that while it's horrifying that a soldier supposedly went on a shooting spree, marching into people's homes and killing 9 children and 7 women, this does play into the hands of the insurgents in Afghanistan and perhaps even those of Hamid Karzai, according to their editorial. Now, it's fairly obvious why this is good propaganda for the insurgency. They find it quite easy to use episodes like this, and of course, it's not the only case of extreme bad behaviour that we've had from US troops in Afghanistan this year. We've recently seen the kill team trials, of course, of those soldiers who supposedly kept bits of corpses as talismans. And then in January, there were those videos on the internet of soldiers urinating on corpses. And there was the Quran burning incident too, although they do point out that that was an act of stupidity rather than malice. And this seems to be madness rather than, deliberately intended. But it's quite easy for the insurgents to paint this as all part of a vast conspiracy that's been cooked up by the Americans to treat Afghanistan badly. And there's so much cynicism in the country against the American occupation that it's fairly easy to get people to believe that. They also reckon that it's convenient for Karzai's re-election campaign because he thinks his best chance of being re-elected is being as anti-American as possible and trying to paint himself as the only person who can bring some security to a chaotic Afghanistan. So the more chaotic it is, the more likely he thinks he is to get re-elected. That's the Independence analysis. Over in here in The Guardian, they ask, what is the point of having foreign troops still in Afghanistan when all they seem to do is increase misery and animosity towards the West? They say there just doesn't seem to be any way that a continuing foreign presence in Afghanistan will calm the situation or help lead to talks more quickly. But then we do have a responsibility in Afghanistan. They pose in the same editorial the question of whether or not it wouldn't be irresponsible to just leave the Afghans to their own devices when a lot of the chaos is of the West's creation. So they don't really arrive at a conclusion, but they pose some pretty difficult questions for NATO authorities.
Now, Elena today is also looking at Egypt, where the acquittal of a doctor accused of carrying out virginity tests on female protesters has caused some outrage.
It has indeed. The Egypt Independent says in their headline that it shows all the shortcomings of the military justice system. They say the women involved are very disappointed and angry, but they're not necessarily surprised because of the way that trial was carried out. The doctor had lawyers to defend him, but the women had none. The judge based his decision on witness testimony of police officers who were there at the time, who might be expected to defend him. They didn't do any forensic tests to find out if the women had actually been raped or not, which is what they say those virginity tests were, a rape. And there's another analysis in there about exactly why. It's by a law professor about exactly what is wrong with the Egyptian justice system. Why does it seem to have all of these hangovers from the Mubarak era? And they're pointing out it takes a long time to change a justice system, probably more than it takes to change a parliament. And authoritarianism was so deeply rooted in Egypt that a lot of ordinary behaviour in Egypt is still illegal under Mubarak era laws, and that's bound to take time to change. But what needs to change first, they say, is that military courts need to be replaced with civilian ones in these kind of cases.
Latest violence on the Israel-Gaza border.
Yes, Haaretz have got a very strongly worded editorial, headlined "Way to Go IDF" in it. They basically say, we've seen this chain of events so many times before. IDF carries out targeted killing, Palestinians respond with rocket fire, they respond with airstrikes. There's a row about who started it. According to Haaretz, it looks like the dialogue of a playground, and it needs to stop happening. And also, more interestingly, in the right-wing Jerusalem Post, they point out that the Israeli government doesn't seem to be taking this rocket fire as seriously as they have in the past. That's because they're not under as much public pressure to stop it, because their new Iron Dome missile defence system has calmed a lot of public opinion in the south of Israel. But that, of course, they say makes the airstrikes look less legitimate than ever if they're not under a lot of pressure from ordinary people to stop the rocket fire.
And staying in the Middle East, something a little different, TV soaps.
Yes, very briefly. There's an interesting piece in The Atlantic asking if Turkish soap operas are changing cultural norms in the Middle East. Basically, in Turkey, which is more liberal social norms, they've got all these lavish soap operas which are safely set in past eras, like that one there, which is about Suleiman the Magnificent, a 16th century monarch. But it includes, amongst other things, Muslims and Christians living alongside quite happily, and rather a lot of sex, including Muslim characters drinking wine and having premarital sex. Now, those soap operas have been dubbed into Arabic and have become a huge hit across the Arab world, despite Saudi clerics are calling for fatwas against watching them.
Sound rather good. Could have them in English or French. Who knows? All right, Elena, thanks very much. Elena with the international papers here on France 24. Here's the headlines then. A Syrian activist in Homs has told France 24 that he's seen the bodies of 26 children